Welcome. Well, we're going to do some plant reproduction stuff here. All right. Uh, I'll direct your attention to the plant reproduction question guide, but this first lecture, this first discussion, goes through number 11. You should know this, okay? So this is 1 through 11. Go with this PowerPoint. I guess it's not a PowerPoint to you anymore. It's a YouTube video. But then the rest of the things, so that would be 12 through 21, that goes with part 2. Just, there you know. There you go. All right, reproduction in plants. So I took this out of notes before with the intention of putting it in now. And I am following through on that intention. You're welcome. So number 1 says a life cycle of plants. So it's called an alternation of generations. So we have a couple different generations in plants. And I'll explain this to you as in it's kind of like, reproduction in plants is really how animals do things. Same thing, except for there's a middleman. There's an intermediate step. All right, and so we have this stage makes this stage, which makes this stage, which makes this stage. And in animals, we don't really have this intermediate step. We just have this, makes babies, makes babies, makes babies, right? So anyways, we call it an alternation of generations. Number 2, we've got a couple different stages. We've got the dominant stage is called a diploid or sporophyte stage. All right. And then we have something called a gametophyte stage. Remember diploid and haploid? Have I talked about that with you lately? Oh, no. Nope. That was bio 1. We were just doing meiosis. Oh, don't worry. I'll give you a heads up, a little refresher on some meiosis stuff on part 2 of the lecture here. Anywho, so the dominant stage of a plant's life cycle is called the sporophyte stage. And it also has a gametophyte stage, which makes the gametes. All right, so don't worry about that last bullet point. Wait, what does the gametophyte stage produce and what does it protect? Go ahead and worry about that one. So number 4, a done goof. Number 4 says, what does the gametophyte stage produce? Answer? You hear my son fake coughing enthusiastically? I can. So what does the gametophyte stage produce? Hey, it makes an embryo. Okay? So let's talk, okay, let's get into that. This is not a good start, is it? All right, let's try to find our stride again. Whew. Number 5, the sporophyte stage produces what? It produces spores. Sporophyte makes spores. Okay, you can get that. It uses this process called meiosis. It's a sexual reproduction process, and I'll refresh that coming up soon. So there you go, number 5. Sporophyte stage produces spores by meiosis. So all plants make spores in some form. What's that spore do? Well, those spores, they divide. They go through mitosis to make something called the gametophyte stage. All right? That's number 6. The spores undergo mitosis to make the gametophyte stage, which leads us to number 7. What does the gametophyte stage make? Well, if the sporophyte stage makes spores, what do you think the gametophyte stage makes? I'll wait. Gametos. JK, gametes. What's a gamete again? Eggs and sperm. Everybody say it with me. Eggs and sperm. Those are our gametes that are produced by biological organisms. That's right. Plants make eggs and sperm. I want you to confront that thought if you haven't yet. Okay? Okay. We've done it. Plant sperm. Okay? Okay. What else do we got here? Oh, those gametes combine to make the zygote. Right? Sperm plus egg equals zygote. That zygote grows up into the new plant, which is called a sporophyte. All right, so let me, I think, help you visualize this. Let me see if I got a visual coming up. Okay, there it is. Let's see. There's our alternation of generations. So the dominant stage, there's our tree, right? That's diploid sporophyte. And then we've got the reproductive parts In this case, this is like a weird cross-section image of a flower that makes our gametes, right? Pollen, eggs, right? There they are, which then combine to make the plant baby, which is again diploids, because 1 + 1 is 2. If you're not really clear on diploid, haploid, just chill, because the next lecture I will go through that. I'll refresh you on that. Okay, so there's a good visual to help explain our alternation of generations. We alternate between a diploid sporophyte generation and a haploid gametophyte generation. Okay. Okay, so that takes us to gymnosperms, which we'll discuss a little bit differently from angiosperms. All right, so we know they all make seeds, but the gymnosperms, if you recall, have naked seeds, right, inside a cone. So that takes us to number 8. Where does reproduction in gymnosperms take place? Cones, okay? And I will talk to you a little about our 2 kinds of cones. So number 9, I will discuss seed cones and pollen cones, and those are coming up in a second. Okay. All right, well, let's talk about pollen cones first. You guys know pollen is plant sperm. It gives you the sniffles this time of the spring. Makes your eyes water and your nose run, and you sneeze. And please don't sneeze or cough in public now. People will run away. Actually, just don't go in public, period, right now. Duh. Anyways, pollen cones make pollen. So in a gymnosperm, we have these little pollen cones. They're male, right? Because if you're making pollen, which is sperm, this must be the male version of a cone. These are little. There's a picture. Can you tell the scale on that? They look like little pine cones. Yeah, but they're not, because they're really, really small. You see those needles. Each of those needles is only, I don't know, an inch long. So pollen cones are really small. These are maybe a ½ inch long. They're very small. They produce lots of pollen. It's usually only in the early spring. So there's our look at pollen cones. You can look up pictures of these elsewhere, but they do drop pollen all over the place. Okay, then we got seed cones, or the other kind of cones. It's the other gender. So seed cones, if pollen cones are male, seed cones are female. So they produce the eggs inside them, the ovules, okay? That's what eggs are in plants. So these are what you would otherwise call a pine cone, right? So here's some big old pine cones from something called a sugar pine. You know that one hanging in my classroom? You remember that? Seems like years ago. Anyways, it's from a pine tree out west called a sugar pine. They have these enormous cones. Those are female, right? So those tiny little pollen cones we talked a second ago, they're ephemeral. They're only here for a little while. The seed cones, no. They're protective. Since they have the eggs in them, they actually house the baby plants, right? The plant embryos, the seeds, inside the seed cone. And they're big boys, all right? And I wore this shirt special today, so you could see. Do you see my pine cones? I think I have a sugar pine on here somewhere. Do you see it? I don't either. Anyways, all right, so that takes us to 10. So we're talking about pollination in gymnosperms. It's going to be different than angiosperms because, pine trees don't have flowers, right? So how does pollen get around? You guys know that flowers are to be pretty attractive. Well, pine trees don't got them. So how does pollen get transported, right? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Wind. It's almost exclusively wind, okay? Wind just blows that pollen around from one pollen cone on a tree to hopefully a seed cone on another tree. Wind goes ahead and takes care of that for us. So here's our short answer to number 10, wind. Number 11, I've got a nice little image for you to look at and explain to me why you see pollen cones and seed cones found on different parts of a tree, right? Usually the way I present this, I ask you guys your opinions. I say, hey, what? Why? So the question I'm really going to ask is, pollen cones and seed cones are separated in the tree vertically, right? So usually you have pollen cones and seed cones. They're not together. Now, if they were mixed up together in a tree, what's that tree run the risk of doing? Pollinating itself. We know, don't pollinate your dang self. That doesn't contribute very much to genetic variation, and that's nasty. So, how do we separate this? Well, here's a picture I just found on the internet of a typical little pine tree, right? This thing is some sort of, maybe a blue spruce. But look, you see all those cones? They're on the top half of the tree. What? Well, if you can see the cones, are those pollen cones or seed cones? Well, you're remembering the pollen cones are real tiny, so those aren't pollen cones. Even those are fairly small cones. Pollen cones are real little, like a ½ inch long. These are seed cones, and they're on the upper parts of the tree. So number 11, what I want you to do is label where A and B are. So A, seed cones, B, pollen cones. So why are the pollen cones low and the seed cones high? Well, if it was switched, if you had pollen cones on top, and we know that pollen is in gymnosperms dispersed by wind, what happens when it's not a windy day? Where's the pollen go? That's right, rains on down. And if you're raining down, you're just going to pollinate yourself. Again, nasty. So there's one reason why would you expect seed cones to be on the top versus the bottom. The other thing is seed cones is where your babies is. Okay? You have your little baby plant embryos, your little baby pine tree babies inside those cones. Protect those things. Have them high off the ground, away from our little, I guess, as many predators as possible. Obviously, birds can go where they feel like it. That's why they rule. But what about like a deer? Can it climb a tree? I don't think so. So deer can't eat the seed cones if they're very high up off the ground. So again, it's protective, protects the next generation. Okay? So that takes us to the end of part 1 and questions 1 through 11 on our question guide. Thank you for coming. Secrets. No, don't forget. I got another secret for you. So this one maybe is a little surprising. I am incredibly uncomfortable singing in public. I apparently don't have any problems doing it in my spare bedroom or basement or car, as long as it's pretty much just by myself. I will not sing solos. I was always horrified of the possibility of doing that in choir, and I turn it down even to this day. Even though I'm recording idiotic songs with Carity, as long as I don't have to do that in front of somebody, it's not that big of a deal, I guess. I'm just so shy.